Do you have continuity or association plan for your business?
Has anyone shared the concept of sustainability with you?
What about the need to protect the rights of minority shareholders?
What are those ingredients germane to having effective meetings?
For these and many more, tune into Corporate Governance Platform every Thursday on MITV, your darling station, on DSTV 255 and UHF 43 at 4:30 p.m.
Corporate Governance Platform is your best medium for informative and educative strategies for the practice of the corporate governance profession.
Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators of Nigeria, ICSAN, the hub of governance professionals.
Thanks for joining Corporate Governance Platform, proudly brought to you by the Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators of Nigeria, ICSAN, the hub of governance professionals, and coming to you live from MITV in Lagos. I am your host, Tunde Odeyemi. More often than not, the prominent discourse that has taken center stage among business people is how to avert business failure, or what some people call business sustainability. On that note, on our show this evening, we are going to be discussing governance guidance for avoiding corporate failures. And to lead in the discussion is a distinguished member of ICSAN, Mr. CHRYSS AYAKOR. Mr. CHRYSS AYAKOR is a Lagos-based management consultant with specialization in corporate governance, tax management, training, and human capital development. He is the managing consultant of ZINAC Professionals and the managing director, chief executive of ZINAC Industries Limited. Mr. AYAKOR is an associate of the Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators of Nigeria, ICSAN, and he has served in the Publicity and Advocacy Committee of the Institute. Mr. AYAKOR is the coordinator of ICSAN Lecture Center at Lekki Phase 1, and is also a member of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria, ICAN, and Chartered Institute of Personnel Management in Nigeria, CIPM. He is an administrator with many outstanding leadership qualities and is happily married with children. Mr. CHRYSS AYAKOR, we are so much delighted to have you on Corporate Governance Platform. Thank you for finding time to join us on the show.
Thank you very much. Always my pleasure to be with you.
Okay. We'll be discussing governance guidance for averting corporate failures. Like I said during my intro, I said most of the discussion in business fora now is business sustainability. That is how to avert business failure. And I think this particular topic is so much important. We want to look at the corporate governance aspect of how we can avert business failure. And I would like to also invite our viewers to be part of the program by sending text message to ask questions or to make comments. You can send your text message to 080-2323-1287. I take that again, 080-2323-1287. Only text message, please, to ask questions or to make comments on this particular topic. So, Mr. CHRYSS, when we say there is, what can we see that will now conclude that there is a corporate failure?
Thank you very much. When we say corporate failure, we are looking at the inability of a company to continue its operations smoothly. And there are symptoms, there are signs that you know that a company is actually experiencing corporate failure.
Okay.
Of course, one of those signs is inability to meet its financial obligations. Another sign is the fact that the company will be finding it difficult to pay salaries. Company will be finding it difficult to meet its demand in terms of its services or product. At times, most of those companies, because of the velocity of the challenge, even to access facility, they'll be finding it difficult. So you see that such companies are experiencing corporate difficulties.
Even though the building is still there, some staff are still going to the organization, there can be failure, even when They are still going to the company, the building is still there, and they are still operating, maybe in a little way.
Absolutely. When the company is doing well, it's not about the building.
Okay.
It's actually about the services. You don't forget, when there is corporate failure or challenges, most of the key personnel will begin to find their way. So those are signs you will always see.
Okay, can you give us about 2 examples of corporate failures internationally can be regarded as a result of failure of corporate governance?
I think one of the pronounced one is the case of Enron in the United States of America. You know, Enron was a company that went into merger and became a very big company. In fact, as at that time, Enron was described as the energy giants of the world. And what suddenly happened? It went into extinction, and that was because the board did not attest strictly to the tenets of corporate governance. And there's no magic about it. Corporate governance is the answer. So Enron is one of those examples in the United States of America. We have bearing banks. We have cases like bearing bank case. We have cases like WorldCom. They were renowned companies that were doing very well, and all of a sudden, they had a lot of challenges that they went into extinction.
Okay, back home.
Do you have continuity or association plan for your business?
Has anyone shared the concept of sustainability with you?
What about the need to protect the rights of minority shareholders?
What are those ingredients germane to having effective meetings?
For these and many more, tune into Corporate Governance Platform every Thursday on MITV, your darling station, on DSTV 255 and UHF 43 at 4:30 p.m.
Corporate Governance Platform is your best medium for informative and educative strategies for the practice of the corporate governance profession.
Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators of Nigeria, ICSAN, the hub of governance professionals. Do you have continuity or association plan for your business?
Has anyone shared the concept of sustainability with you?
What about the need to protect the rights of minority shareholders?
What are those ingredients germane to having effective meetings?
For these and many more, tune into Corporate Governance Platform every Thursday on MITV, your darling station, on DSTV 255 and UHF 43 at 4:30 p.m.
Corporate Governance Platform is your best medium for informative and educative strategies for the practice of the corporate governance profession.
Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators of Nigeria, ICSAN, the hub of governance professionals.
Many thanks for joining us on your favorite program on TV, Corporate Governance Platform, proudly brought to you by the Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators of Nigeria, ICSAN, the hub of governance professionals, and coming to you from MITV here in Lagos. In the next couple of minutes, we'll be discussing issues that surround, that pertaining to ICSAN sectoral groups. I am Tunde Odeyemi, your host, and I have with me right here in the studio the Chief Executive Officer, Registrar, and a Distinguished Fellow of ICSAN, Mrs. Taiwo Ganiyat Olushesi. She will be leading the discussion on the ICSAN sectoral groups. You are welcome, Madam, to Corporate Governance Platform.
Thank you very much, Dr. Odeyemi.
And thank you for finding time to join us on this program.
Thank you, too, for what you've been doing for the Institute in the past 1 year, running this show.
Okay, we are going to discuss the new initiative of ICSAN, the strategic sectoral groups. ICSAN recently launched sectoral groups within the organization. We learned that the sectoral groups will have a life of their own and would, of course, customize the activities to the need of their members. Would this not weaken the mother institute?
Thank you very much, Doctor. On the contrary, this is going to actually strengthen the reach of ICSAN.
Okay.
Yes, because ICSAN is comprised of members in several sectors. And it will not be easy. We found out that it's not actually easy for the Secretariat alone to be driving these sectors.
Okay.
As such, we have our members who are in diverse sectors, who are leading those sectors. It is imperative that we bring them on board, create sectors around those, create groups around those sectors, and have our members drive corporate governance discussions in that sector. it will not only strengthen the institute, to strengthen our members, and also, validate the fact that ICSAN is truly the hub of governance professionals. So it's not going to weaken the Mother Institute.
So it's not going to weaken the Mother Institute? Okay.
Not at all. You will also be seeing the growth in the next few months as these sectors start working.
Okay. How many sectoral groups were inaugurated, and what informed the sectoral groups that you were starting with?
Okay. We have identified 12 strategic sectoral groups. We are not just creating sectors for the sake of creating.
Okay.
We are creating them strategically. And when I list out the sectors that have been identified, you would agree with me that there are issues of corporate governance surrounding these sectors that needs to be quickly addressed. We actually identified 12 of them, and we have the energy, we have the manufacturing, we have the aviation, we have the insurance and the pension, we have the logistics, we have the not-for-profits, we have the banking and the allied institutions, we have the public and allied institutions, we have the built industry, we have the maritime, we have the digital economy, and of course the academia. You will agree with me that all these sectors have issues that needs emergency intervention. Is it the academia where the lecturers are threatening to go on strike? Is it the built industry, the Ikoyi tragedy that just occurred? We have identified corporate governance issues in that sector. Is it aviation? A lot of issues came up during the pandemic when we could not travel by air. Is it the logistics? A lot of us now buy things online, and we have logistics issues coming up. Is it the not-for-profit? The newcomer introduced some regulations for NGOs, and we saw the uproar of the religious bodies and the NGOs. Several issues of corporate governance have reared their heads in these special sectors that we have identified. And in no time, we shall be rolling out, issues, corporate governance issues in those sectors that will be driven by those sectoral groups.
Wow, these sectors are really pivotal to the growth of the economy, isn't it?
Sure.
Okay. If you are just joining us, it's Corporate Governance Platform, and we are discussing ICSAN sectoral groups. And I have with me the registrar and the CEO of ICSAN with me in the studio, discussing the ICSAN sectoral groups. Now, this new initiative, is it limited to the members alone, or is it can it be extended to non-members that are probably students?
Definitely. In ICSAN, even a student is a member.
Okay.
It's a student member already. As such, don't forget that most of our student members actually operate in sectors already. They are already graduates who have their professions. And so they already automatically have charted a course for themselves in the different sectors that they operate. So of course our student members are also going to be part of the sectoral groups because we are building them too.
Okay, the student members will be part of the sectoral group, even though they are not yet qualified.
Definitely.
Okay. Now, will these sectoral groups be providing sectoral-based training for members and, of course, non-members?
Definitely. I mean, that's how we are going to be cascading into the general society. We're going to be leading discussions. We're going to be issuing guidance notes. We're going to be issuing communiques. We're going to be having trainings. We're going to be having courtesy visits to stakeholders in those sectors. I look forward to a situation whereby the banking sectoral group of our institute will also be collaborating with other professionals.
Do you have continuity or association plan for your business?
Has anyone shared the concept of sustainability with you?
What about the need to protect the rights of minority shareholders?
What are those ingredients germane to having effective meetings?
For these and many more, tune into Corporate Governance Platform every Thursday on MITV, your darling station, on DSTV 255 and UHF 43 at 4:30 p.m.
Corporate Governance Platform is your best medium for informative and educative strategies for the practice of the corporate governance profession.
Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators of Nigeria, ICSAN, the hub of governance professionals.
You are welcome back. It's the Corporate Governance Platform, proudly brought to you by the Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators of Nigeria, and we are discussing governance guidance to avert corporate failure. Before we went on break, our guest, Mr. CHRYSS mentioned some examples of corporate failures globally. Now let's come back to Nigeria. I want you to give us some examples of corporate failures or corporate scandals in Nigeria.
Maybe we'll look at the banking sector.
Okay.
Let's start with, should I call them the defunct Oceanic Bank? They
Okay.
suffered a very serious scandal and failure. We also have the likes of Intercontinental Bank. I want to believe that they are buried in the same cemetery because they are actually died off.
Okay. Okay, those two banks.
Majorly, yeah.
Majorly in the
Yeah,
banking
yeah,
sector.
In the banking sector.
Okay, how would you assess the state of adherence to corporate governance generally in Nigeria?
Okay, we all know that corporate governance is still young in Nigeria, so to speak. If we look at the PLCs, the listed companies, if we take a scale of 10, I want to give them 5.6 to 6% adherence for PLCs, listed companies. Then if we look at
What percentage did you give?
I say 5.6 to 6% over 10.
Okay, that's
Over
not
10.
percentage. That's about 50 to 60%, right?
Yes, that's
okay.
yeah, 55 to 60%.
All right.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, sir. I was talking about scale of 10.
Scale of 10, okay.
Yeah, if that's for PLC, for listed companies.
Okay.
But if we go to LTDs, I want to categorize LTDs into A and B. The structured LTDs, I will give them, say, 40% or up to 45%.
Okay.
But we also have LTDs that are, to a very large extent, are owners managed. And those organizations, it is very difficult to separate ownership from management.
Okay.
Then such, I don't know how to rate them. For me, I think maybe, I don't know how to rate them. It all depends. So it's, for that aspect, very poor.
Okay, the rating keeps going down.
Going down,
Keeps
yeah.
going down.
Yeah.
Okay. And the good thing is that the PLC, they are above average.
Absolutely.
That means they are almost getting there.
Absolutely, they are getting there.
Okay. Would you subscribe to the view that adherence to the principles of corporate governance is an antidote for corporate failure?
Sure, absolutely, absolutely.
How?
You see, if you look at the tenets of corporate governance, we might want to list them to include accountability, honesty, transparency, independence, full disclosure, etc. So if what we're asking is we're just saying that if organizations, board structures are held strictly to these principles, basically corporate scandals will reduce to 0%. Will reduce if we adhere to, for example, disclosure. I disclose. When I disclose fully as a board member or as a management staff, then the chances of conflict of interest will reduce drastically. So the truth is that any company, any organization that actually want to last long, want to stay like organizations are supposed to stay, the answer, the solution is corporate governance. Imbibe it, entrench it, practice it, encourage it, demonstrate it, exercise it.
Okay, that's good. What then is the best approach? You actually talk about PLC the other time, you talk about the limited liability company, and you talk about the sole proprietorship. Now, what is the best approach in entrenching these corporate governance principles?
Yeah, I think basically sensitization. Let's let them. The truth is that I am a corporate governance consultant. In one occasion, in different occasions, I have met boards. In different occasions, I have met boards where, when I talk corporate governance, I understand they know little or nothing about corporate governance.
Okay.
So sensitization is very key. Advocacy is very key. We need to take the talk to them. We need to let them. In fact, ICSAN has a role, and ICSAN have been trying it, but it's not enough yet. Right? All stakeholders, we must move close to this. Let them hear. Not only the private sector, let the government also hear that, oh, corporate governance is the answer to sustainability. And if that is done, then of course there will be regulations that will actually guide a lot of sharp practices. And if they are there and people are aware that, look, corporate governance is a business facilitator, not a business killer, then people will willingly, without pressure, embrace it. And if all boards, PLCs, private companies embraces corporate governance, I can assure you that sustainability will be the order of the day.
Okay, I would like to go back to the initial analysis that you gave. The PLC, the limited liability company, and the self-owners, okay. I want to believe that the PLC, they are there, or they are moving closer to getting there.
Sure.
Because most of these PLCs are regulated. Now, in the absence of regulation, how can corporate governance be entrenched? Somebody, a sole proprietor company, for instance, or a family business, if it's not being regulated, may not give a damn about corporate governance. How can we make them believe that corporate governance is to the advantage or to the benefit of their organization? Because we are doing this to avert. Our topic today is what we can do to prevent corporate failures. So some of these companies that were low rated with your analysis, how can we really entrench corporate governance in these companies?
Let's borrow from the Holy Bible.
Okay.
The Bible says faith cometh by hearing, and hearing the word of God. Now, I talked about sensitization. The institute is doing it. Let the whole stakeholders do it. Let's take this gospel to these people. Constantly, let them to understand that, look, if anything must be done, it must be done well. I told a client of mine, the MD, I said, look, in business has ethics.
Okay.
And that until you are ready to follow the ethics, then you are not ready to be in business. So for those companies, those smaller companies, the one we call owners manage, even if it is one man manage, I'll give you an example. If you have a company and you are the sole signatory to the company, to the accounts of the company, you agree with me that you can mesmerize. You can handle the company the way you like. But corporate governance will not allow that, because it talks about internal control system. It talks about that will take us to checks and balances. So, I mean, how can you address this where the MD will just call, please, do you have any money? Please bring money, meet me. I mean, you can't account for. So when time reach for you to pay bills, you can't pay bills. So we need to let them know. We need to be preaching it to them and let them know that, look, of a truth, corporate governance is the answer.
Okay, I want us to go to the Nigerian Code of Corporate Governance. Will you rate the Nigerian Code of Corporate Governance 2018 as being consistent with global best practice?
Sure, it is, sure. However, I won't give it 100% anyway. But of course, I give it a high mark. Sure, it is. Yes, because if you look at the recommendation from those provisions, where of principle 1 down to principle 28, they are okay. For example, it talks about separation of power and office between the chairman and the MD. Okay. It is done internationally, so it's okay. You talk about the appointment, the power and the role of the company secretary. Of course, that is, if you give these people this appointment, then of course, it talks about board committees, like audit committee, risk management, of course, risk management, audit committee, remuneration, nomination, all these committees are there. And so the Nigerian Code of Corporate Governance 2018, I think for me, is good enough to be compared internationally.
Okay. Away from the Nigerian Code of Corporate Governance, before the advent of the Nigerian Code of Corporate Governance, there were sectoral codes, different sectors of the economy. Will you say that these sectoral codes are still useful? Even with the coming in of the Nigerian Code of Corporate Governance, are they still useful in their different sectors?
Absolutely, they are. I'll give you an example. The commonest code that we can mention here is CBN code, of 2006. We can talk about SET code, that actually came to be in 2003 and actually has passed through some amendment. You know, we have to have codes like NICOM code, PENCOM code. You know, NCC code is, sure, they are still okay. Like SEC codes now, you cannot say you will not comply with SEC code, the provisions of SEC code. So those sectoral codes are still relevant. And can I tell you something? If you take those codes out, then it won't be too long. The operators in those sectors will begin to experience scandal, corporate scandals. So they are good. They are still very useful.
They are still very useful and they should be retained.
Sure.
Okay, if you are just joining us, it's Corporate Governance Platform coming to you from MITV, and we are discussing governance guidance to avert corporate failures. And I have with me in the studio Mr. CHRYSS AYAKOR doing justice to that discussion. Now I want to go into effective risk management. What's the relationship between effective risk management and prevention of corporate failures?
Very tight. You can't separate it. Very tight. Let's start with looking at risk management. Is the act of putting in place measures that guard against risk. Is that okay? Yeah. And for you to prevent corporate failure, then in risk management, you should be able to have a robust risk management policy to the extent that you'll be able to have the ability to, number one, identify the risk that your company is exposed to. Don't forget, different companies in different sectors might be exposed to different risks, different types of risks, right? So there is need for risk identification, risk evaluation, risk assessment, and risk management measures. If all of these are effectively handled, then chances of corporate failures will be very slim. And the reason why we have them is because most organizations, like I said earlier on, some of these organizations don't even know what is risk management, let alone thinking of having policies towards that direction. Okay. So risk management is very germane. You can't do without it.
Okay, we have a text message here from BC Onifade. She's asking that, she said, thank you, the guest in the house. What is the relationship between corporate governance and corruption? Most companies that have failed today, they failed because the leaders of those companies are corrupt. I want you to enlighten BC Onifade a little bit on corruption and corporate governance.
Well, the activities of corrupt persons might be mistakenly seen to be things that directors do. But the truth is that every corrupt activity is predetermined. Every corrupt activity is predetermined. But when it comes to corporate governance, the truth is that some of these persons that make corporate mistakes that leads to corporate failures is out of ignorance. They're actually out of ignorance, right? I'll give you an example. A board that is not well structured, when I mean a board that is not a balanced board, you have 5 board members and all the board members are lawyers. When decisions that borders on legal issues, you can agree with me that they will give it good attention. But what happened to such a board if decisions are bordering on tax or oil and gas or issues that are far from law? So that chances are they might make mistake. And that's why corporate governance talks of training. So corruption, like I said, every corrupt activity is predetermined, it's intentional. But there are corporate governance issues that happen that are so hard on the company that are not intentional. It's ignorance, okay? Ignorance. All right. However, there are some that are intentional, all right? But I think that's just the relationship.
So even though it is, you can ignorantly work towards the failure of a company by not doing the right thing, which corporate governance preaches.
Yes. Do you know why? I'll give you an example. We have companies where the captains, the owners, so to speak, the head of those companies are illiterate.
Wow.
Not illiterate that they cannot read and write. Illiterate because they don't know, they don't have basic business management skills. Wonderful. And when you don't have them, there's not much you can do. A lot of companies have gone off business because the agreement between the company and another company were not well interpreted. And because the owner of the companies didn't know the importance of getting a legal advisor to actually scrutinize the contents of that agreement. And you cannot say they intentionally wanted that company to die, right?
Okay, that is understandable. Now, what role can whistleblowing play in the context of corporate failure prevention?
We can look at whistleblowing as a warning sign. We can look at whistleblowing as a signal. You know, I mentioned the case of the defunct Enron.
Okay.
Before Enron collapsed, there was a woman that was an executive management staff of the company that actually was actually blowing the whistle. They didn't listen to her. And if they had listened to her, who knows, probably they would have prevented what happened to Enron. Now, whistleblowing will actually give you signs that something is wrong. And that sign might come when that thing that is wrong is still at its elementary stage, that is, it can be prevented, right? But if there is no whistleblowing, people will be doing it and be getting away with it. And nobody will know that something is going wrong. Until the time you will get to know that something is going wrong, the thing has already swallowed everybody, including the organization. So whistleblowing is very, very key. And we strongly encourage organizations to have a robust whistleblowing policy, and it should be followed to the letter.
Because it's going to benefit the organizations in
Absolutely.
the end. Okay, let's look at these principles of corporate governance, the principles of responsibility and accountability. They are well known in corporate governance balance. Now, I want you to explain how can these principles also lead in the prevention of corporate failure.
Okay, let's take it from King 2 Codes of Corporate Governance.
Okay.
When I say King 2, for my dear listeners, I'm talking about Code of Corporate Governance from South Africa. It was chaired by Professor Marvin Keynes. We have King 1, King 2, and King 3. In King 2, one of the major contributions of that King 2 was the fact that there is a distinction between accountability and responsibility, according to that king, right? And according to that code, it says accountability is a requirement for a person in a position of authority to, one, justify his actions or his inactions, two, defend his actions or his inaction, three, explain, and four, account for. Then he talked about responsibility as to be required to be held liable for doing the wrong thing. And he said that code went further to say that directors of companies should be accountable to the owners, that's shareholders.
The shareholders, yes.
And they should be responsible to every other stakeholder, including the shareholder. So every other stakeholder, including user, consumers. So if that is actually interpreted at the board level, for them to understand that as board members, that they are accountable to shareholders, then they will always think twice before they take certain decisions.
Wonderful. I understand the explanation on accountability and responsibility. Now let's look at transparency and disclosure. They are also two important concepts in corporate governance. How are they deemed to be that important?
Well, you call them principles. We could also call them pillars. I would like to use the term pillars to answer that question. A building or a structure stands on pillars.
Sure.
So full disclosure and transparency are some of those pillars of corporate governance. And let's look at disclosure as a corporate governance principle. What are we disclosing? Who should disclose? Let's start with who should disclose. Every board member. Not just board members. We have people in executive position that make sensitive decisions, but they are not board members. They should disclose. What should be disclosed? Everything. Now, we will talk about disclosure.
We should take the third one that is on my mind. Who should we disclose to?
Who should we? Okay. Yeah, who should we disclose? Of course, to the stakeholders.
Okay.
Everyone that have a stake. I'll give an example. Yesterday, I went to a place to buy a drug, and the pharmacist, I was asking, what's the difference between why you recommending this one instead of this one? And he was not explaining the, what do they call it now?
Composition.
The composition of the drugs, one after the other. I said, well, if only the percentage put there is correct. That is disclosure to a large extent. Okay. Now, let's go back to the corporate world. You are disclosing. Let's look at statement of financial position. That's balance sheet. You have disclosed your asset in the balance sheet. The question is that all you have disclosed there, is that all you have? That is what we are saying. Because if you look at your balance sheet, A is equal to L plus C. Then in the area of liabilities, what you are owing, will you be courageous enough to disclose all the debt owed by your company? That's disclosure. Do you know why it is very important? Because that financial statement, at the end of the day, is the only document that investors rely on in decision making. Whether they want to make investment decision or what we call divestment decision, they go back to the financial statement. And if your disclosure is wrong or is incomplete or inaccurate, then don't forget, garbage in, garbage out. The decision made by these proposed investors or investors will be wrong decision. So disclosure is very, very germane. And of course, we talked about transparency. How honest are you when you are disclosing? I'll give you an example. You have a piece of land, your company have a piece of land, company XYZ Limited have a piece of land in Lekki, and the piece of land, the market price is 100 million. And your financial statement, because you want to get a facility from a bank, and you are disclosing 500 million. This is misrepresented. I'll give another example. See, you see land. You have a piece of land in Maiduguri. Before the advent of Boko Haram, the demand for land in that place was high, and the land was going for 50 million a plot. You have like 10 plots, and because of the activities of Boko Haram, security, everything, the demand has fallen, and as a result, the price has gone down. And in your financial statement, you have not revalued that land. You are still disclosing 50 million. Then something is wrong. You are not transparent, your disclosure is wrong. And that is what corporate governance is saying, no. Let it be the way it is. Don't look at white and you call it black. Let white be white.
Okay, Mr. CHRYSS, AYAKOR, before I allow you to go, I must ask this because we are talking about prevention of corporate failures in Nigeria. What will be your advice to Nigerian companies? Micro, small, medium, big, large? What is your advice to Nigerian companies on how to prevent corporate failures? I'm going to wrap up with that. Okay,
including non-profit making organizations.
Okay, that's good.
The advice is to wholeheartedly embrace corporate governance.
Okay.
To entrench corporate governance principles. That is one advice. Number two, to hire professionals that will actually guide them to put their companies, their practices are right. And the truth is that for you, the only place to get this professional is ICSAN. I'm not saying that because I am, but I'm just saying the truth. The only place to have this professional is ICSAN. Go to ICSAN, get chartered secretaries that will help you and entrench or incubate corporate governance principles in your organization. No matter the size of your organization, grow with it. What we are simply saying is that the advice is that practice honesty, practice transparency, practice integrity, practice accountability. Live it, practice it.
Thank you very much.
I think everything will be all right.
Thank you very much. You have heard it all from Mr. CHRYSS AYAKOR. Practice honesty, integrity, transparency, disclosure, and so on. Thank you for coming on the show, and thank you very much for sharing your thoughts on how to prevent corporate failures. And for our viewers, thank you for being part of us. And for the person that sent a text message, BC Onifade, thank you very much for the text message. We'll wrap it up from here. And I would like to invite you to join us again next week, same station, same time. I remain Tunde Odeyemi. Keep spreading the gospel of corporate governance. Bye for now.